Welcome to 168 Community Church, a church plant launching in March of 2021. Even as we prepare for launch, we want to continue to provide a taste and feel for what services look like, what we stand for, and communicate what this means for you. My name is Liz, and I have the privilege of participating at 168 by leading the kids team. We are so glad you joined us online. As we prepare our hearts for worship in anticipation of Jesus' birth, we recognize that Christmas not only brings us sweet memories, but unearths hard emotions. So even as our band leads us through a song called Promises, I want to read these words from Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, as a way of encouragement. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. God is for you.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant, of faithful promises. And time again, and you have proven you do just what you said. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Is your faithfulness to me? Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. And great is your faithfulness to me. From age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can't do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it come to pass. And great is your faithfulness to me. And great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting sun, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
Put our trust in you, God, and I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. And I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, and my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let
I so appreciated the opportunity to worship with you again through song. As we continue on this series about where we're going, I just want to ask you a question. What is the best Disney movie ever produced? It's obviously Lion King, edition 1994. Now, you might be fighting me about that answer. You might have a different opinion about what the best Disney movie is ever, but here are some reasons why. Number one, there's a hero. Number two, there's a hero to be. Number three, the hero dies. And then number four, that new hero to be transitions, finds his own identity. But beyond that, there's also a villain. His name is Scar, and we'll get into that a little bit more. There are new friends who eat bugs. Of course, there's love. And then there's redemption of the new hero, and then a new king. Even as a child, I was always so intrigued by the villain that I mentioned, Scar. Why, number one, would any sane parent name their child Scar? Number two, why, when every time Scar starts to sing, are there green flames lighting him up from the back and the entire music turns ominous? And number three, this is the question I always had as a child. Why would Scar ever choose a journey or a narrative or a story where everybody hates him? But seriously, we're in Luke 19 today, and there is a person in Luke 19 that has so many similarities to Scar. He's a villain. He's portrayed negatively, and his name is Zacchaeus. Now, if you have a church background or a Jesus background, you might be familiar with this name Zacchaeus in a song. And the song goes like this. Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. And that's all you know, right? There's a guy, he's vertically challenged, but then he meets Jesus, and all of a sudden his heart is transformed and he gives money back to the poor. He gives 4 times as much to those he wronged. And that's the end of the story. But let me try to actually link up Scar to Zacchaeus right now and to show you kind of their heart motive. And we'll unpack more of it in Luke 19. But listen to this. Scar wanted the kingdom to fulfill his heart, the animal kingdom, but Zacchaeus wanted money to fulfill his heart. Scar was willing to cheat, steal, and lie to get what he wanted, the kingdom, and Zacchaeus was willing to cheat, steal, and lie to build his life around what he wanted, money. Scar betrayed his own people and left the Lion clan to seek his goals at the peril of his own people. And Zacchaeus betrayed his own people, had the audacity to stay in his own town, sought his own goals at the peril of his own people. Watch this. Now, if you have your Bible, you can turn there. But Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 2, it reads this. Jesus entered Jericho, and Jericho is the modern day New York City. It's bustling with trade and business, taxation. It was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector. This is the moment where you have a mic and you stinking drop it. A chief tax collector. And Luke says he was wealthy. Of course he was wealthy. But this is what you probably need to know about the context of being a chief tax collector in Jericho. So when Rome took over and Rome had conquered and taken over Jericho and the Jewish people were living there, when Rome took over, they needed to tax the city so they can build canals and bridges and walls and continue to supply their military with arms. So what did they do? They found a person, a tax collector, and planted them in the city. Now, the Romans were smart enough to know that if they took a Roman person and put them in a Jewish city and asked him to collect money, that guy would never know where the wealth is. He doesn't have relational capital. He doesn't understand the system and the culture, so he will never get the most amount of money out. So what do? They found a guy like Zacchaeus, a native Jew who had relationships, who understood where all the money was, and they gave him a task. They said, hey, Zacchaeus, we just want, for example, $500 from each household. Now, if you ask for 1,000, that's fine. We just want 500. You can take the 500. So this is what he did. Zacchaeus was the tax collector who went door to door with soldiers from Rome to his friends that he grew up playing soccer with, to his relatives, to his families, to his neighbors who are all Jewish, and said, hey, I need your money. I want your money. I'm here to collect. Can you imagine being a Jew at this time, living in Jericho? And Zacchaeus shows up. He not only asks for $500, but he asks for $1,000. And you know he's stealing from you. And not only is he stealing from you, he used to be your friend. And he's taking that money and giving it to Rome, your oppressor, who's oppressing you. In verse 2, when it says, there was a man named Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector, what you need to hear is Scar from the movie that I just talked about. It's literally the villain of villains who's out to get you and take everything that is important from you. Now notice, he's not only a tax collector, but it says he is a chief tax collector. Now, I don't know if you can see my hands or if you're watching the video or listening to the audio, but it's this idea of he is at the top of the pyramid. Zacchaeus is right here, and he has a bunch of little tax collectors underneath him. So everything that these little tax collectors are collecting and stealing, he gets a portion of that. He is the chief of the people who are stealing from the Jews. Now look at verse 3. It says, he wanted to see who Jesus was. But because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see Jesus, since he was coming that way. You know, the word wanted in those verses literally means searching for or desiring. Do you think it's possible that Zacchaeus knew that money could never truly fulfill him? Do you think maybe Zacchaeus knew that after collecting money after money and jamming it into his pockets, he realized that once he dies, the money stays? That the next nice car, the longer vacation, the bigger house, the bigger bank account was only going to give him temporary refreshment, but he was desiring for something that was going to provide eternal refreshment. Do you think it's a coincidence that Jesus in the Bible says that he is living water, and once you drink from his cup, you will never be thirsty again? Do you think maybe Zacchaeus had a desire and a yearning for something more? Let me just pause for a moment and say this. My friends, if you are a believer of Jesus, if you identify as a Christian, our culture in 2020 needs to see believers who are following Jesus, who say there is no greater thing. Vacations are nice, cars are nice, houses are nice, white, perfectly painted fences are nice, but there is someone so much greater. And my heart's desire is for him, and his name is Jesus. Look with me at verse 4. It says, so he ran ahead and he climbed a tree. And even as we talk about this value of engagement today, I just love and appreciate Zacchaeus' proactivity. Right? Maybe right now you're watching this from home on a Sunday morning and you're still in your PJs. But Zacchaeus had to proactively wake up, get dressed, go outside of his house, work through a packed crowd, getting elbowed. Can you imagine Zacchaeus and just wonder with me how much physical abuse he was taking on, being a short, vertically challenged person without his Roman soldiers, trying to work through a crowd where he's stealing from everybody? How many elbows do you think he got jabbed in his side? But he knew he was missing something, so he climbed the tree. And maybe even as we talk about engagement, what you're being convicted about right now through the Holy Spirit is that God wants you to engage. Beyond just a 1 hour Sunday morning video that you're watching, he wants you to engage with him. And we'll unpack that a little bit more right now, what that looks like and what that means. And at this point, Jesus obviously is a celebrity. He's famous. And he's coming through town. Look at verse 5. It says, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus. Okay, this is actually Mike stinking drop number 2. Before we go on to the next part of the verse, have you ever just paused and wonders, how does Jesus know Zacchaeus' name? In verse 3, it says that Zacchaeus went up the tree just so that he can get a glimpse of who Jesus is. He just wanted to know who he is. So obviously Zacchaeus doesn't know Jesus. How does Jesus know Zacchaeus by name? in the midst of the hundreds, if not thousands, that are pressing around Jesus, do you think maybe for a moment, when Jesus looks at him and says Zacchaeus, he actually looked up to a branch above him thinking, is there another Zacchaeus in the house that he's talking about? You know, the crazy thing about Jesus is that scholars estimate that around this time in Jericho, there was probably about 10,000 priests. You heard that right. 10,000 priests who lived in that city. And there was also a chief priest who represented religion in that area. Now just stop with me and think about this. There is 10,000 priests. There is a chief priest who's supposed to be the icon of religion. And Jesus goes and calls out and meets the chief, not priest, but the chief tax collector. He goes out of his way, looks up at that tree and says, Zacchaeus, I want to be in your home. Even as we continue to unpack this principle of engagement, I wonder what type of dinner tables Jesus had and how different they are from ours today. But look at verse 5. It says, come down quickly, which means hurry up, man. And I love that Jesus, like a boss, just invites himself over. But that word there, must, is the same word found in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must, same word, go to Jerusalem and suffer, that he must be killed and on that third day be raised to life. This is what Jesus is saying when he says, I must go to your house, Zacchaeus. He's saying, just like Jesus had to, catch this, absolutely without alternative choice or plans, go to the cross to die for us, so Jesus had to, in Luke 19, absolutely without alternative choices or plans, he must go to Zacchaeus' house. Why? Because he says, today in verse 5. And this word today appears in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 15, where God says, today, and we'll see this unpack, if you hear my voice, open the door. It's a salvation call. Zacchaeus, like we mentioned, is searching. He's looking. He's yearning. He's desiring. God says, today, I must be in your home. Let's see how he responds in verse 6. So Zacchaeus came down at once and welcomed him. You know, the irony of verse 6 is that Zacchaeus' desire to see Jesus, though commendable, was surpassed by the fact that Jesus wanted to see him. But catch this. Zacchaeus wanted to see a glimpse of Jesus, but Jesus says, meet me face to face. Zacchaeus knew Jesus from afar. Jesus called him by name. That's John chapter 10:3, that Jesus knows you by name. Look at verse 7. It says, they grumbled. The crowd grumbles and mutter, he has gone to be the guest of the sinners. What they're saying is, we thought Jesus was the Messiah. He's going to go eat with a sinful man, a man who represents the enemy government that takes our money and gives it to them. How can Jesus eat and fellowship with such a traitor? Jesus is an equal opportunity diner. You know why? Because the compassionate heart of Jesus is worried more about salvation than association. Jesus is worried more about salvation for Zacchaeus than what other people think about him. You know, Darrell Bach is a scholar of Christianity. He says it this way: to want to live a moral life is part of God's call for believers. Along with that is the desire to keep one's distance from morally suspect practices. This principle is a good one. However, it risks being applied so thoroughly that one ceases to associate with unbelievers for dear of what comes with relationship. So let me say this to the person who's trying to figure out who Jesus is, but can't get beyond the hypocrisy of Christians who are mumbling, muttering, and judging. If that's you, this is for you. Rise above the hypocrisy of those that say that they are Christian, but don't live like it in real life and on social media. I mean, that's what Zacchaeus is doing, right? He's climbing that tree. He's rising above the religious hypocrisy. Rise above the infiltration of politics and Jesus infused together. Rise above it. See him clearly. Rise above the mad chaos of Christian leaders who keep getting kicked out of leadership. Don't let that jade you in seeing Jesus clearly. Rise above and read the Bible for yourself so you can encounter Jesus genuinely. Here's a statement I want to leave with you. Don't let the hypocrisy and imperfection of the religious cloud your vision of seeing Jesus. Look at verse 8. Zacchaeus encounters Jesus and says this, "But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, 'Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount.'" Just pause. You know what Zacchaeus is saying? He's saying, if I have taken $1,000, then I'm going to pay back that person $4,000. If I wrongly took $10,000, I'm going to give back $40,000. But you know what? In addition to the Levitical law that says all you have to do is give back 20% of interest, I'm going to give not only 20, but 25. Plus, the text says, Zacchaeus said, I'm going to give my most prominent value that I hold so dear, money, half of it, half of my possessions, I'm going to give to the poor, in addition to the 25%. What is happening to this man, Zacchaeus, who was the villain who loved money above everything, who burned bridges relationally with his own clan, who backstabbed his friends who he played soccer with so he can pocket some more change? He met Jesus. He encountered genuinely Jesus. Because again, he figuratively climbed a tree because he realized his heart was empty. He needed to fill his heart with Jesus. Here's the point, just the one point that I'm trying to make as we talk about the principle and the value of engagement. What does it look like for us to engage? Only an encounter with Jesus changes the heart's priority towards engagement. For Zacchaeus, repentance came in the form of action because Zacchaeus had a new lifestyle, because he had a new Lord, because he met a new Lord. Engagement only comes from genuine encounter with Jesus. You know, here at 168, engagement means spiritual, physical, and emotional engagement in God's mission. But you might be asking, what is God's mission? You're telling me to engage, John, but what is God's mission? Look at verse 9 and 10. It says, "Today salvation has come to this house because this man Zacchaeus is a son of Abraham." Focusing on verse 10. "For the Son of Man came," this is the mission of Jesus, "for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." Translated to our language at 168, it means we help people pursue Jesus and be pursued by him, participate in the flourishing of our communities, and proclaim Jesus amongst all people. In 2010, there was a census, and in Will and DuPage County, that's where we're located, there were 1.2 million people registered. Out of the 1.2 million people, 717,000 self-identify themselves outside of the Christian, Orthodox, and Catholic circles. In 2020, just this year, Barna did a study, and they found that 50% of millennials, 35% of Gen X, and 26% of boomers stopped attending church altogether. Why do I share these statistics with you? Because that means that there are 717,000 people, just like Zacchaeus, who need to be engaged and who have to genuinely encounter Jesus. They're the people who live right next to us. They live above us, below us. They shop at the same grocery stores as us. They attend the same schools as us, but they haven't encountered Jesus yet. That's an astronomical number of why it's important, if you're a believer in Jesus, to engage with the mission of God, and the mission the way that we say it at 168. There is this idealized version of the kingdom. For Scar, it was power. For Zacchaeus, it was paper, which they both know won't provide everlasting fulfillment. Yet they're still running after it because the alternative, the best alternative, was never presented to them in a way that would engage their hearts. And his name is Jesus. For some, their hearts are hardened. But for others, their hearts are open for spiritual harvest. Are we going to engage with the mission of God? Are we going to engage with the mission, again, the way that we say it at 168, to pursue, participate, and proclaim? You know, a few months ago, I was talking with a person who's part of our church plant and launch, and he is a lawyer by trade. And he excitedly called me up as we're dreaming about this whole church plant. And he said, hey, me and a few of my friends, we have a heart to leverage our work, being lawyers, to be able to start a pro bono clinic for people who can't afford legal services. I mean, what does it look like for you to leverage your profession for the mission of God? Now, notice that Zacchaeus, he actually doesn't abandon money. He doesn't. He actually leverages it for God's mission and his kingdom. I mean, imagine with me what it would have been like for a charity of his day to have Zacchaeus come knocking on their door and saying, hey, I have $10 million. I mean, we don't know how much money he had, but it says in Luke 19 that he was going to give half of his money away to the poor. So he shows up with 10 million and says, hey, here's $10 million I'm giving to you. Don't you think that that was a vibrant opportunity for gospel sharing? Don't you think the people who received that money looked at Zacchaeus and said, wait a minute, aren't you the chief tax collector? Why are you giving $10 million away to us? And he could say, because my heart genuinely encountered Jesus, and I'm here to engage in God's mission. What about the people he took $1,000 from? And he says, here's $4,000. He took $10,000, he stole it, and he gives $40,000. He's leveraging his money. What was once an idol, he's now leveraging for God's mission because he's engaged. So, how can you highlight Jesus? By leveraging, if you're a student, your schoolwork. If you're not a student, what about just your work, your 9 to 5? We have to move away from this idea of clocking in and clocking out without actually thinking about how we can engage with our work, our co-workers, to further God's mission. What about your friendships? Sharpening one another. What about, and this is a hard one, what about your singleness? Singleness, it's hard. It's lonely. It is. But what does it look like for you to continue, even in your singleness, to be on fire for God's mission, to continue to be engaged in reaching others for Jesus? What about your marriage? How do we leverage our marriage for the kingdom? Our kids, our finances. Here's the one truth that we're talking about through Luke 19. Only an encounter with Jesus changes the heart's priority towards engagement. So allow God to ask you right now through this text in Luke 19, who are you and where are you in this story of engagement? Are you even in the picture frame? Or maybe you're still in bed in your spiritual PJs, recognizing that the kingdom is at hand, but you're still chasing your own vice, your own idol. Maybe you are Zacchaeus on top of the tree, and Jesus is looking at you, and he's been looking at you for a while now, and he said, hey, come down here, welcome me into your home. And maybe that's you. God's been knocking on the door of your heart, but for some reason, you haven't chosen to engage. Maybe this is the opportunity for you to engage, to say yes to Jesus. Maybe you are the crowd you're too busy judging, grumbling, and pointing out the flaws of everybody else instead of focusing on the extraordinary grace and forgiveness that Jesus is offering people. Maybe you are Zacchaeus and you've even invited Jesus into your house, into your heart, but you stop there. You haven't gotten and you're not all in. You're not giving everything you have to Jesus to engage with the mission of God. You've stopped, and you know you've stopped in the deepest part of your heart. Maybe your step today, right now, is to be all in for Jesus. Well, I want to share with you at least a few practical ways that you can be all in and totally engage with the mission of God and how we say it at 168. Maybe God is calling you to join a small group, even as we launch in the next few months our small groups ministry. Maybe for some of you, it's working through racial reconciliation. And we talked about that at our very first message. So if you need to go back and look at it, you can. But stick around for a little bit longer because Liz is going to share with you some details about how we're navigating that conversation here at 168. Maybe for you, it's willingly participating with us as we seek the flourishing of our communities like we are through sharing connections. And today is our last day to connect in that event. Or maybe it's volunteering at a legal clinic or a virtual homework club. And these are just a few examples of what it looks like to emotionally, spiritually, and financially be involved. Yes, let's be impressed by Zacchaeus, who climbed a tree to see Jesus, and then his heart was transformed and he began to engage in God's mission. But yes, even as we close this message, let's be more impressed by Jesus, who climbed a tree. The Bible tells us it wasn't a tree, it was a cross. He died there for us. He broke his body. He shed his blood so that we might see him, be transformed, not to Sunday morning Christians who simply engage with some digital content or attend church, but people who are so transformed with a genuine encounter with Jesus, where they fully engage in participation. Jesus didn't die so that we can simply sit on the couch and watch digital content. And he sure didn't die just so we can attend Sunday morning services. He died so that we can engage in God's mission. The tagline at 168 that you've heard and we're going to continue to talk about is that you have 168 hours in 1 week. Let's go live it for Jesus. My friends, that is not simply a cute tagline that we use here at the church. It's a rally cry. It's a DNA infusing, culture infusing, hey, let's do this together cry. So if this resonates with you and you want to be a part of where we're going, we would love to connect with you. Stay tuned right now for 3 practical ways that you can engage with the mission of God and how we're living it out here at 168.
What a challenging message by John for our community to live engaged. Here are 3 steps you can take to live out our value of engagement. First, might God be calling you towards a better understanding of racial reconciliation? What does it mean to seek the flourishing of our communities for all people, including people of color? And how can we have productive and safe dialogue about race? Sign up for and engage with our 5-week online community as we unpack what it looks like to move our church towards racial reconciliation. You can find the sign up on the front page of our website. Second, are you a 6th to 12th grader at 168? Come join us on December 27th as we have our annual Student Holiday Jam. Although we can't be together in person, that doesn't mean we can't have fun and send you candy. Go to www.168cc.org/students and find out how to receive free candy for you and any friends you invite. Finally, today is the last day to give towards our Christmas drive. We are partnering with Sharing Connections in Downers Grove so that caregivers can provide coats, toys, and other items for their kids this Christmas. Because we take the call to participate in the flourishing of our community seriously, 168 will be matching 100% of your financial giving towards Sharing Connections. That means your financial donation to our Christmas drive will be doubled. Interested? You can find all the details on our website under the December tab. We truly love being generous, and your financial giving allows us to bless community partners like Sharing Connections. If our values, where we are going, and what we stand for resonates with you, and you haven't given yet or forgot to give in the month of December, we would love to have you engage through giving. Your gift is tax deductible and can be securely given through our website or via check. You can mail any checks to 900 Ogden Avenue, Downers Grove, Illinois, box number 235. As always, you have 168 hours this week. Let's go live it for Jesus this Christmas season.